The sound of expensive heels cut sharply through the quiet air of the skyward executive terminal. A woman's voice followed, cold and commanding. "Security, get this woman out of here right now. She clearly doesn't belong." Every head turned. Near the gate stood Evelyn Grant, wife of billionaire industrialist Thomas Grant, her manicured hand pointing toward a small elderly woman who clutched a simple boarding pass. The woman's name was Ruth Ellis, 76 years old, dressed in a plain navy cardigan and soft walking shoes. Her reading glasses hung from a silver chain around her neck. A modest black purse rested in her hands. There was nothing glamorous about her appearance, only quiet grace. Evelyn's voice sliced through the tension. "Ma'am, this is the first-class boarding area. You're lost. The economy terminal is down the hall." Ruth didn't respond. She stood still, holding her ground as murmurs filled the lounge. A few people looked away, others whispered. Everyone could feel that something ugly was unfolding. Thomas Grant appeared from the bar, glass of scotch in hand. His tailored suit caught the light, his face wearing the easy arrogance of a man who thought the world belonged to him. "What's the problem, Evelyn?" His wife gestured toward Ruth. "This woman somehow ended up in our section. She's claiming to have a first-class ticket, but clearly that's impossible." Their son Jason barely looked up from his phone. "How does that even happen? Does security just let anyone in here now?" Laughter rippled between them. Ruth's cheeks warmed, but her eyes didn't flinch. She simply said in a steady, soft voice, "I have my ticket." Thomas let out a quiet, dismissive laugh. "Anyone can print one of those nowadays." "You're embarrassing yourself, ma'am." The crowd's discomfort thickened. A few phones were already raised. Someone whispered, "Are they really doing this?" A young woman sitting near the corner, Lena Park, instinctively began recording. Her voice was low but clear on her live stream. "This family is humiliating an old woman in public. This is unreal." Ruth handed her documents to the nearest gate agent, a nervous man barely out of his 20s named Chris. He scanned the barcode with trembling fingers. The machine beeped green. Ma'am, it says here your ticket's valid. Seat 1A on the private charter to Miami." The lounge fell silent. Evelyn's smile stiffened. "Run it again," she demanded. "Your scanner must be malfunctioning." Chris hesitated. "No, ma'am. It's confirmed. Ms. Ruth Ellis is listed as a verified passenger." Thomas frowned. "Do you have any idea how much these flights cost?" "There's no way Ruth interrupted quietly. "I purchased this seat through Sterling Executive Travel 3 days ago. Fully paid." Her tone was calm, but behind it was history. Decades of practice holding composure when others questioned her worth. Jason muttered under his breath. "Right, sure. Maybe she's a cleaning lady who got lucky." Evelyn gave a laugh that could freeze glass. "Oh, please. Look at her shoes. She probably doesn't even know what Sterling Executive Travel is." Lena's phone caught everything. Viewers multiplied by the minute. Comments poured in. "Why is no one stopping them?" "That woman looks terrified." "Name the family." The humiliation was deliberate, layered, and unrelenting, but Ruth didn't tremble. She adjusted her glasses, looked at the gate screen, and waited. She had been underestimated before. In boardrooms, in contracts, in rooms filled with people who thought respect was reserved for the rich. This wasn't new, it was only louder. Minutes passed. Security was called. A tall black officer named Marcus Reed arrived, professional and alert. His voice was firm but calm. "Is there a problem here?" Evelyn seized the chance to reassert her control. "Yes. This woman is trying to board a private charter with fake documents. She's been causing a disturbance." Marcus looked at Ruth. "Ma'am, may I see your ticket?" Ruth handed it over without hesitation. He scanned it. Green light again. Verified. He checked her ID. Everything matched. "Mrs. Ellis," Marcus said respectfully, "your documents are perfectly valid. You are indeed a first-class passenger on this flight." Evelyn's face flushed crimson. "You must be mistaken." "Do you know who we are?" Marcus answered evenly. "Ma'am, that doesn't change the facts." The viewers online surged into the thousands. The comment feed lit up. "They're finished. She's handling it like a queen. Keep filming." Thomas was losing patience. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We've got a meeting in Miami at 3. Handle this woman before I make some calls." He didn't realize he was already on the wrong side of history and about to pay the price. Ruth looked at her simple wristwatch. She didn't need to rush. Time had always been her ally. While security and staff scrambled, the lounge continued buzzing. People whispered her name without knowing it. Some speculated she was someone important. Others assumed she was confused. But Ruth Ellis was not lost, and she was not confused. Inside that modest purse was a phone containing contact numbers that could reshape industries, and she knew exactly which one she was about to call. Ruth stood still while the Grant family's voices tangled around her like smoke. The humiliation was loud, sharp, and very public, but behind her quiet eyes a storm was already forming. She had seen men like Thomas Grant before, men who thought respect was a luxury you had to buy. Jason leaned against a marble column, laughing as he filmed. "Mom, this is going viral already." "Look at her face," Evelyn smirked. "Good. Maybe it'll teach people to stay in their place." Ruth didn't flinch. "Officer," she said softly, "I'd like to board my flight now." Marcus looked from her to the Grants, his jaw tight. He was getting updates on his radio, social media traffic climbing by the second. The control tower was aware. The airline's PR team was on alert, but Thomas wasn't done. "You think we don't know how this works? You people always pull the victim card. Fake tickets, fake outrage." The words landed hard in the silence. A few bystanders gasped. Lena's live stream exploded with messages. Did he just say that? This is racial profiling. She better own their company when this is done. Ruth simply opened her purse and pulled out her phone. The movement was slow, deliberate. Her voice stayed calm. "Excuse me for a moment," she said, and pressed a contact labeled Daniel Ellis. The call connected instantly. "Cancel the Grant Industries defense partnership," Ruth said clearly. Effective immediately, the room froze. The only sound was the distant hum of jet engines outside the window. Thomas frowned. "What did you just say?" Ruth ended the call, placed her phone back in her purse, and looked directly at him. "You heard me," Evelyn scoffed. "You expect us to believe that nonsense? You don't have the authority to cancel anything." Thomas's expression changed. The name Ellis clicked in his mind. He'd seen it on contracts, quarterly reports, and confidential emails. Ruth Ellis, chairwoman and founder of Ellis Dynamics, the single largest supplier of defense-grade AI systems in the country, and Grant Industries' biggest partner. Color drained from his face. You're the CEO of Ellis Dynamics." "I was," Ruth said, her tone almost kind. "I handed the daily operations to my son 2 years ago. But I still sign the contracts." The shock rippled across the room like electricity. Evelyn's confident smile cracked. Jason's phone slipped from his hand and hit the marble floor with a sharp sound that echoed. Lena's live feed viewers doubled in a heartbeat. "Oh my God, she's the CEO. She just canceled a $1 billion deal. This is poetic justice." Ruth didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The balance of power had shifted entirely and everyone could feel it. Thomas tried to steady his breath. "Mrs. Ellis, there's clearly been some misunderstanding. We can discuss this privately." "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Grant," Ruth replied. "You just made the cost of disrespect very real." Marcus received another update through his earpiece. Grant Industries' stock had already begun to dip in pre-market trading as the livestream spread. News outlets were picking it up. It was no longer just a viral video. It was a corporate earthquake. Lena zoomed in slightly, whispering to her viewers. "She's calm. He looks terrified. This is the wildest thing I've ever seen." Thomas turned to his wife. "Evelyn, stop talking, now!" But Evelyn couldn't. Her fear was turning to rage. "You can't ruin us over a misunderstanding. You people—" Ruth held up a hand. "That's enough." The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of decades of command. Even Marcus felt it. Everyone did. "I spent my life building something that demanded respect from men who thought I didn't belong in the room," Ruth said. "You remind me of every one of them." Thomas swallowed hard. What happens now?" "You'll find out soon," she replied. "But for now, I have a plane to catch." She took her verified ticket from Marcus, nodded once in gratitude, and began walking toward the boarding gate. The crowd parted like water. Phones recorded from every angle. Evelyn's trembling voice followed after her. "You can't just walk away like this." Ruth didn't look back. "Watch me." By the time she stepped onto the jet bridge, the internet had already named the incident the Skyward Scandal. Thousands were watching live. Millions more would see it before the night ended. And Ruth Ellis hadn't just humiliated a billionaire family. She had just rewritten what power looked like. The terminal erupted the moment Ruth disappeared down the jet bridge. Voices clashed, phones buzzed, and the Grant family stood frozen in the wreckage of their own arrogance. Evelyn spun toward her husband, panic sharp in her voice. "Thomas, fix this! Call someone! You can't let her walk away like that." Thomas didn't answer. His phone was already lighting up. Every missed call came from a name that mattered. His CFO, his legal counsel, his board chairman. Each one was a reminder of what he had just lost. Jason hovered nearby, pale and silent now, staring at the phone he'd dropped. The live stream was still rolling, comments exploding faster than he could read. They just lost everything. Ellis Dynamics owns them. The internet never forgets. Thomas finally picked up one call. The voice on the other end was his CFO, strained and urgent. "Sir, are the rumors true? Did you insult Ruth Ellis? We're getting flooded with sell orders. The Pentagon's procurement office is asking questions." He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. All he managed was, "We'll handle it," before hanging up. Marcus stood nearby, still processing the chaos. He'd handled fights, false alarms, emergencies, but never a corporate implosion sparked by a single act of arrogance. His radio was alive with chatter from airport command. "Keep the Grants calm. Media vans are on the way. Do not let them leave yet." Evelyn clutched Thomas's arm. "It can't be that bad, right? She can't really ruin us," but Thomas knew better. He had read those contracts. He'd signed them himself. Ruth Ellis wasn't some name on paper. She was the cornerstone of his empire. Without her company's systems, half his projects would collapse overnight. He turned to Marcus, voice unsteady. "Can you get me access to that plane? I need to speak with her." Marcus shook his head. "Sir, the aircraft has already taxied." Outside, through the large glass windows, the sleek white jet was pulling away, engines humming like a whisper of judgment. Evelyn covered her mouth. "She's leaving," Jason muttered, "and she's taking everything with her." Lena stayed filming from a distance. Her live stream had crossed 50,000 viewers and hashtags were multiplying. And with Skyward Scandal, Respect Costs Nothing, Ruth Ellis. The audience wasn't just watching. They were investigating. Within minutes, online sleuths had confirmed Ruth's identity, her company's value, and the scope of the partnership with Grant Industries. By the time the jet lifted into the clouds, the Grant's empire was in free fall. The next hours unfolded like a disaster movie. Stock tickers bled red. Grant Industries plummeted 20% in after-hours trading. Analysts speculated about breached contracts and government reviews. News anchors repeated Ruth's calm words like a mantra. "Cancel the Grant Industries partnership," effective immediately. Every network wanted her on air. Every newspaper wanted her quote. But Ruth didn't speak to anyone. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. In her seat aboard the plane, Ruth gazed out the window at the shrinking lights below. Her reflection stared back, an old woman who had spent a lifetime being underestimated. She thought of her late husband who used to say, "Dignity is the one investment that never loses value." She smiled faintly. He had been right. Meanwhile, Thomas sat slumped in the terminal lounge, his phone vibrating nonstop. He finally answered one call only to hear the frantic voice of his general counsel. "Thomas, the Defense Department just froze our pending projects. They want an explanation about the terminated contracts." "This is a nightmare," Jason tried to interject. "We can apologize publicly, right? We just say it was a misunderstanding." Thomas looked at him hollow-eyed. "The world saw it, Jason, every word, every insult. You can't apologize your way out of a billion-dollar mistake." Evelyn was crying now, her earlier arrogance crumbling into disbelief. "She can't destroy us like this." "We didn't mean," Thomas cut her off sharply. "You didn't mean it? You humiliated a woman who could buy and sell us twice over. You thought respect was optional." The silence that followed was unbearable. Outside, flashes from news cameras began to light the windows. Reporters were gathering, waiting for a statement that would never come. Lena ended her live stream but stayed in the corner, still filming quietly for documentation. She whispered to her followers before stopping the stream. "This isn't just a scandal. It's a reckoning." Across the internet, Ruth Ellis became a symbol, a story shared with disbelief and admiration. Commentators called her the woman who brought a billionaire to his knees without raising her voice. But Ruth wasn't thinking about any of that. As the plane cruised through the night, she opened a leather folder resting on her lap. Inside were updated documents, legal summaries, and a draft of the termination clause she had invoked. Her assistant, seated across from her, leaned in. "Ma'am, the grant board is requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." Ruth didn't look up. "They'll have to wait. I have a meeting in Washington first." Her tone carried the calm of someone who had already moved on. The rest was just noise. Below the clouds, the world churned with consequences. Every choice, every careless word was now reshaping industries, and this was only the beginning. By dawn, every major network carried the story. The footage had spread faster than any press release could control. In London, Hong Kong, New York, anchors repeated the same line. A single phone call from Ruth Ellis wiped billions off Grant Industries' market value. Inside her jet, Ruth read none of it. Her tablet showed rows of financial data, not headlines. To her, this wasn't revenge. It was correction. For too long, people like the Grants had moved through boardrooms assuming respect was optional. She wanted them and the world to see what that cost. Down below, chaos ruled the Grant offices. The board had called an emergency session before sunrise. Executives crowded around a speakerphone. The CFO's voice cracked. "We've lost 43% of our defense revenue pipeline overnight. Our contracts with Ellis Dynamics account for 61% of next quarter's projections." The general counsel added, "The termination clause is airtight." She cited moral breach. "We can't litigate our way out of this." Thomas listened in silence, a man measuring the ruins of everything he'd built. Every call ended with the same plea: find a way to make this right. But there wasn't one. Not until Ruth decided there was. Meanwhile, social media had turned her calm defiance into a symbol. Workers shared the clip under a single caption: "Respect costs nothing." In classrooms, in corporate chats, in living rooms, people replayed the moment she refused to raise her voice. It wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a mirror. Ruth's flight touched down in Washington. Waiting at the gate was her chief of staff, Naomi Walsh, carrying a portfolio thick with papers. "Ma'am, the Pentagon procurement meeting has been moved up. They want confirmation that the grant partnership is terminated." "It is," Ruth said simply. "Let's focus on the replacement contract." "Yes, ma'am. 3 competitors already requested consultations." "Good. Send them my calendar." As they walked, reporters shouted questions from behind barriers. "Mrs. Ellis, did you plan the incident? Do you feel vindicated?" Ruth didn't break stride. "No comment," she said, and meant it. She hadn't planned humiliation. She'd merely stopped accepting it. Back in New York, Evelyn tried damage control of her own. She recorded an apology on her phone, eyes swollen from crying. "To Mrs. Ellis and to everyone who witnessed my behavior, I am deeply sorry." She uploaded it, hoping sympathy might slow the backlash. Instead, comments flooded in. "Too late. You learned the hard way." Thomas was still in the conference room when his assistant entered, trembling. "Sir, the Defense Department suspended our security clearance pending review." That single sentence hit harder than any headline. Without clearance, their entire defense division was paralyzed. He sank into a chair. "Call her," he whispered. "Tell Mrs. Ellis I'll do whatever it takes." Naomi's phone rang during a meeting. She looked at the screen, then at Ruth. "It's the Grants." Ruth nodded once. "Put it through." Thomas's voice was raw. "Mrs. Ellis, please. I know we can't undo what happened, but our employees, thousands of them, will lose their jobs. I'm asking for a chance to make things right." Ruth's tone stayed even. "You want a chance? Then you'll need to change." "What do you mean?" "Not an apology. Action, structural reform. Respect built into policy, not press releases." Thomas hesitated. "Tell me what you require." "I'll send a document by noon," she said. "Review it before the market closes. It's the only offer you'll get." When she hung up, Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure he'll agree?" Ruth smiled faintly. "He has no choice. Pride doesn't survive a stock crash." By midday, the proposal reached the Grant boardroom, a 3-option ultimatum outlining total contract termination, partial suspension, or full corporate restructuring centered on accountability and equity. Each page detailed consequences, numbers, timelines, and one non-negotiable clause: Evelyn Grant's removal from all company representation. Thomas read every line twice. His board watched silent. Finally, he exhaled. "Option 3, he said. We rebuild or we die." When the announcement went public, investors gasped. Grant Industries would undergo the largest internal reform in its history. $50 million earmarked for inclusion programs, mandatory training for every executive, an oversight council reporting directly to Ruth Ellis Dynamics, and buried deep in the statement, Evelyn Grant's resignation to focus on personal growth and community service. The internet erupted again, but this time with admiration. She didn't destroy them, she made them rebuild. That's real power. As markets stabilized, Ruth reviewed updates from her analysts. Stocks recovering, Naomi said. Public sentiment's turning positive. Even the labor unions are praising the reforms. Ruth closed the report. Good. Then maybe it'll mean something beyond the headlines. That night, she sat by her office window overlooking the city. The skyline glittered with the quiet hum of industry she'd helped shape. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to exhale. The world had changed slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough. And yet she knew it wasn't over. Power, she'd learned, always tries to reclaim itself. But so does dignity. Months passed, but the echo of that day never faded. What started as a confrontation in a private terminal had become a blueprint for corporate accountability. Every major network, university, and business forum had dissected it. The Ellis Protocol was now part of corporate ethics training across industries. Yet Ruth stayed silent, working quietly behind the scenes while the world debated her motives. At Grant Industries, change was no longer a press statement. It was daily life. The new Diversity Council met every Monday. Pay transparency reports were made public. Executives who once dismissed inclusion as a distraction now measured their bonuses against cultural reform metrics. Evelyn's resignation had turned into something unexpected. She volunteered at a nonprofit that trained women re-entering the workforce. At first, she did it to repair her image. Then one afternoon, after helping a woman write her first resume in 10 years, she realized she'd stopped thinking about image at all. For the first time in her life, Evelyn Grant understood humility. Thomas worked harder than he ever had before. Without his usual arrogance, he listened. He visited factories, met engineers, heard grievances. When journalists asked if he resented Ruth Ellis, he said simply, "No, she reminded me of what leadership means." His words carried weight because he'd lost everything before earning it back, but the truest impact lived beyond their company walls. Ruth's quiet defiance had sparked a movement. Companies large and small reviewed how they treated not just clients but people. Hashtags faded, but policies remained. Universities invited her to speak, and she always declined. She didn't want fame. She wanted progress. Late one evening, Naomi entered her office holding a letter. "This came through certified channels," she said. From Grant Industries. Ruth opened it. Inside was a brief message handwritten by Thomas. "Because of you, we are better. Thank you for holding us accountable when we refuse to hold ourselves." Attached was a donation receipt for $50 million to Ellis Foundation's STEM program for underserved youth. Ruth set it down quietly. "Good," she murmured. Then the lesson stayed. The following week, her son Daniel joined her for dinner. "Over soup and bread," he said. "Mom, you know they're calling you a legend online?" She smiled faintly. "Legends are stories people tell when they think the work is finished. Ours isn't." He looked at her with admiration. "What do you think was the turning point?" "The moment I chose not to shout," she replied. "Anger burns fast. Dignity lasts." Outside, the city lights reflected off the glass. Somewhere, a television played a documentary about the Skyward scandal. A journalist's voice said, "It began as an act of prejudice but ended as a lesson that changed how power is defined." Ruth listened for a moment, then turned the volume down. The world could tell the story. She had lived it. Later that night, she opened her laptop to review quarterly impact reports. The Ellis Foundation's programs had doubled in reach. Graduation rates for scholarship students were soaring. She felt something she rarely allowed herself: pride. Not in her wealth or reputation, but in the quiet, cumulative proof that respect, when practiced consistently, could rewrite the future. Across the world, people who had once stayed silent in the face of humiliation remembered Ruth's calm voice at that gate. They remembered how she never raised her tone, how she fought not with anger but with precision. Her story became more than a scandal. It became a reminder of agency. In a small office in Atlanta, a young woman watched the footage before filing a discrimination complaint against her employer. In Lagos, a teacher showed it to her students, explaining how self-control could be the highest form of power. In Tokyo, an executive quoted Ruth's line, "Respect built into policy, not press releases," during a board meeting. The ripples reached places Ruth would never see, touching lives she'd never meet. On a quiet Sunday morning 2 years after the incident, Ruth sat by her garden window sipping tea as sunlight warmed the room. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Grant Industries named one of the top ethical corporations of the year. She smiled softly, not out of triumph but satisfaction. People could change, even those who had caused the deepest wounds. Naomi arrived with fresh documents, but Ruth waved them aside. "Not today," she said. "Today I just want to be still." The garden outside bloomed in soft color. The world kept turning, learning, forgetting, and remembering again. Ruth closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in the quiet. The lesson she'd proven didn't need to be said anymore. It had been absorbed into the culture. Respect costs nothing. Disrespect can cost everything. And sometimes all it takes to rebuild the balance of power is one calm voice refusing to be erased.